I think it's always a cool story when you hear about how kids grew up and one of their dreams was they wanted to play this position for this school, and then they actually get to go out and do that. And that's pretty badass. That's really cool. And those are the types of stories that I wish, admittedly, that we would acknowledge more, that we would talk about more, and we would give more energy and effort and investment on, because those are pretty cool things. It's a good life teacher to tell kids that, hey, if you have a vision, if you have dreams, and you really apply yourself towards working towards those, there are no limitations on what you could potentially do. And for Sam Ehlinger, he grew up as a kid wanting to play quarterback for the University of Texas. He wanted to be that dude. That was his dream. That was his vision. And he ultimately made it happen. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. And now, I'm sure as a byproduct, the other big vision or dream that he had was that he could go and be a starting quarterback in the National Football League. To which then, at that point in time, I start to say, well, maybe the dream and the vision is a little too unrealistic here. You might get drafted. You might have a chance to stick around in the league, but big starter? I don't know about that. You weren't exactly a big-time starter in college. Adequate one, but not special. And to me, lacking a lot of special traits that you would be looking for a guy like this with several years of big program, big-time starting experience at a big school like Texas, that would make you sit there and want to invest a high draft pick in him. I mean, he's got enough size for the position. So you look at him, he's about 6'2", 225 pounds. He's actually well built. He's a pretty good athlete, really good on the move. You know, he's a guy that you can extend plays with his feet. He's a guy that can, roll out on the move when plays break down, and he can scramble, keep them alive. He's a guy that can pick up yards with his feet that more and more the NFL requires out of today's starting quarterbacks. Not everybody has to be a Michael Vick type, Lamar Jackson type of runner, but you do want those guys that can extend plays. You want those guys that can play outside of structure. You want those guys that can be a bit of a threat as a runner, because it opens up things for your own offense and creates even more challenges for the defense. And Ehlinger has that. Now, the problem for me is when you look at Ehlinger is that you say, that's his best trait, and even then, it's not special. Like, these, again, when we're talking about the quarterback position, you were talking about guys that tend to make it to day 3 of the draft, assuming they get taken in day 3 of the draft. You usually fall out and you see guys getting drafted that they're either incredibly raw, but they have great physical tools, but they never pieced it together, never really got much of an opportunity. Or you see guys like a Sam Ehlinger, guys that maybe have some good traits, but they have some major flaws, and they have some real physical or skill set or talent tool limitations that prevents them from being a much higher draft pick. And that's certainly the case with Ehlinger, because when I look at him as a passer, I say, this is a pretty good athlete. And at times he plays bigger than his 6'2" size, and I think that especially holds true in the pocket. I see a guy with a lot of average to below average traits as a pocket passer, as a passer in general. I think his arm strength is just average. Kind of the guy that's enough to get you by, but not enough to truly be able to make all the throws on a consistent basis. Not the guy that you're going to sit there and have to worry about him consistently stretching you out and beating you down the field vertically. Not a guy that you're going to worry about him being able to get off tight throws into small throwing windows, because he just doesn't have that level of arm strength. He has to throw with a certain level of anticipation in order to be able to throw in some of those spots. And again, I look at his field vision, his decision making, and I think it's kind of average. At times, he's a little too quick to run with the ball, which he's a good athlete, which I kind of get. So he trusts his ability to run with the ball, but he's not a great enough runner, a great enough athlete where you would want him to consistently do that at the NFL level. Like, you would want him to be a guy that could beat you with his arm first and use the legs in more of a complementary type of fashion. Field vision-wise, he has a tendency to kind of lock onto his primary read, show a little bit of ability, I think, as you progress through 2020 to go through some of his progressions, but not on a consistent basis. I wouldn't exactly say he does the best job of automatically recognizing and reacting to what he sees. He has a tendency to hold onto the ball a little too long. As I start to go through it, it's a lot of average to slightly or at below average time to traits. The arm strength, like I said, is not special, and his accuracy can be a little buckshot at times. I think some of that ties into the mechanics not being the best, not always setting his feet, not always being in the best throwing positions. You know, a little bit of length in terms of his release and delivery. So, you know, again, these are the types of guys that when you look at it day 3, like, you're getting limited players. You're getting guys that you sit there and say, okay, you know, here's maybe what they can do, and here's a lot of things that they can't do. Now, what's going to be key for Sam Ehlinger is that he can get into a situation where he can work on some of the mental aspects and some of the mechanical type of functions of the quarterback position if he wants to stick in the league as a backup. Like, personally, I like Shane Buechele, his former compatriot at Texas, who went on to transfer to SMU after Ehlinger beat him out for the job. And you say, well, why would you like Shane Buechele more than a Sam Ehlinger? Because Ehlinger is a little bigger and he's a better athlete. Now, I grant you that. He is. He absolutely is. But I look at Shane Buechele and I say, I think he has more talent as a thrower of the football. He has more abilities to make more things happen as a pocket passer. Where Sam Ehlinger feels like the kind of guy that you brought him into a spot, let's say, because your starter got injured or your backup's out and here's your third string option into Sam Ehlinger. I look at him and I say, you'd be kind of terrified every time he dropped back to throw. You'd be worried, like, is he just going to lock into the primary guy? Is he going to freeze up out there? Does he have the necessary arm talent to get it to the right person at the right time? Does he have the ability to hit guys in the right spots on a consistent basis? Where I have a little less concerned about that with Buechele, because in terms of arm strength, it's better. In terms of accuracy, I think it's better. Like, that's what it's about here, is about projectable traits. Now, I certainly think that Ehlinger is worth a draft pick. I certainly do. Like I mentioned before in the last video and talking about Shane Buechele, it frustrates me with today's game that the quarterback position, which is the most important one in the league by a wide margin, nobody disagrees with that. Everybody agrees with that, especially the fans of teams like mine and the Bears that don't have a quarterback. They understand the importance of that position. Like, these are the types of guys that tend to drop in the draft process and potentially go undrafted, and maybe in some cases that's what they want. They want to be able to not get drafted instead of being drafted to a bad situation in the 6th or 7th round, because at least they can say, if I'm undrafted, I have a choice of 32 teams in my situation where I can go to and who I work with and who I might have to compete with in order to get a job. But, you know, these are the types of guys that you should take flyers on in day 3. Because the vast majority of prospects you take at other positions, they'll never make it. Well, if I'm going to swing at somebody and not have them make it, I'm at least going to try and do that at the quarterback position, because imagine if you connect on one of those. You get a great backup. You get a low-end starter, maybe a good starter. And I certainly don't think Ehlinger is that, because, you know, like I said, you look at him, and sometimes you just have to use the smell test, the sight test, and ignore some of the grades and some of the metrics. Like, as you look at some of the quarterbacks in this draft, when I look at Zach Wilson, do I see a long-term NFL starter? Yes. When I look at Trey Lance, do I see a long-term NFL starter? Yes. When I look at Trevor Lawrence, do I see a long-term NFL starter? Yes. When I look at Mac Jones, do I see a long-term NFL starter? Yes. You see what I mean? For some of those guys, like, your eyeballs tell you this should be a long-term NFL starter. What level or degree of good or greatness they may end up achieving can be determined by a lot of factors, not just always related directly to the player. But you look at them and you say, they pass the sight test. They look like an NFL starting quarterback. They play like an NFL starting quarterback. They pass that smell test of, yes, I'd be confident if my team took him that this guy is going to be able to start in the league for a decade plus. You look at a guy like Sam Ehlinger, assuming you're not a Texas fan, or assuming you have some type of clue at least as to what it takes to play quarterback in the NFL, etc. Like Sam Ehlinger, does he pass that test? No, he doesn't. He feels like a guy who had an adequate college career. Wasn't special, but it was adequate. But the type of guy that you look at and you say more likely not 10 years from now, you'll be wondering, hey, whatever happened to him? More so than looking at him as a guy that could be a big-time starter. When I'm talking about guys on day 3, personally, to me, yeah, he's a good athlete, But I would rather risk my biscuit taking a quarterback at this spot in the draft on guys with better passing skills, better arm talent, better accuracy. Because those are the type of traits that are projectable more so than what Sam Ehlinger does. I think he's a guy that may get drafted. Like I said, I'd be okay taking a 6th or 7th round flyer on him, but I would not have a ton of expectations for him.